Hi. So, here's the second one that I'm recording. I'm kind of trapped in my room until the floor outside dries because I mopped it. I did it. I did a basic human thing called mopping the floor. I should probably sweep my own floor, but I don't wanna, so I'm not going to at the moment. Anyway, this is chapter 23 of Black Cats Are Bad Luck and So Are You, Kid by Holly. Let me just warn you now, though. Some of these chapters later on do get a little bit more on the angsty side. You know, that angst and comfort tag actually it pulls some weight. It actually pulls some weight. So I do recommend looking at the tags if you give a crap, or if you're like me and you're chill with most things as long as it's not the extremes, you should be fine. Here we go. The ride to school was mostly quiet, save for Sushi's agitated growling when the blonde man drove over bumps or cracks. Then they arrived. His homeroom teacher collected them, while Sushi was rescued from the depths of the vehicle by Mr. Yamada. The two men rode up the elevator from the parking garage to the school, where they parted. The raven-haired man to his classroom, and the blonde to the teacher's lounge, to set his sushi up in one of the extra rooms. Azuku was taken out of the carrier and set on his desk, and his teacher walked away to crawl into his sleeping bag and await the bell to ring and class to arrive. Azuku sighed and curled up onto his desk, grooming his fur. After about 20 minutes of waiting, people began to enter the classroom. Zuko sat up and greeted his friends as they approached his desk and cooed at him. Todoroki walked over and rubbed his fur as well, and he even warmed his hand for Zuko to enjoy. It was very nice, and he purred softly for the boy and Finks. When the bell rang once more, they all sat down and classes began. His homeroom teacher just discussed updates on school things and explained that they would be doing in hero training this afternoon, before falling back over and going back to sleep. Once they were free to do as they pleased, everyone crowded around Izuku, who was a bit perturbed by the tension, though his friends tried not to touch him so much, which was nice. They were all quietly gossiped and talked to each other while Izuku listened from the desk below. After that, classes went by smoothly, and lunch came before he knew it. He was taken by his English teacher to the teacher's lounge. Inside, the man took him to the extra meeting room where Sushi was being kept. The cat in question perked up at the sound of somebody entering his domain, walking over to greet the newcomers. Zuko was set on the ground so the blonde could prepare their food, and Sushi trotted over to greet the other, grooming his fur and purring. Where'd they take you, Kit? Was it the stinky place with all the animals and medicine? Azuku purred up at Sushi and licked his cheek in return, tail flicking amusedly behind him as he replied, The vet? No, they didn't. I was in class to learn things with my friends. The other cat looked down at him and sighed, shaking his head and continuing to groom Azuku, though he muttered something about strange street cat talk and let the conversation go, as he didn't want to explain it all anyway. Mr. Yamada bent down to set their bowls on the floor and called them both over gently. Sushi trotted over, claiming his bowl, so Izuku took the other one and crouched down to eat. His teacher pet him gently as he ate, muttering something quietly and to himself in English. Zuko didn't care to try and translate it with the limited amount of English he knew, so he just kept eating, tail flicking contentedly behind him. About when both he and Sushi were finished eating, his homeroom teacher entered the room, speaking up quietly. You ready to eat, Zosh? The blond man looked back at the other and nodded, standing up from where he was crouched. They both left the room, quietly conversing with one another. Izuku finished his food and licked his whiskers clean, looking over at Sushi, who finished with his own meal. Izuku left the other bee and walked over to the window, where the cat bed sat right in the sun. Izuku yawned and jumped up, curling up in the plush bedding. After a few moments, Izuku felt another weight join him. When he looked, he saw Sushi, crawling on top of him and laying beside him. The cat was kind enough to sit on the other side of him, so he could still lay in the sun. Sushi began to clean his fur, one paw lounging over Izuku's side to keep him still as he worked on the other's short yet curly and knotted fur. Izuku purred softly and closed his eyes and let Sushi work, the other cat curling around him all the more to purr louder and rattling his bones. Izuku sighed and let the other cat be, too tired to care. Eventually, he fell asleep against the white underbelly of the tabby behind him, full belly warmed and soothed by the sun. Izuku woke up a little while later to someone shaking him awake. He clearly looked up to see his English teacher once more, smiling down at him. The man snorted at the sight of his disgruntled face and pet his head soothingly and apologetically. Izuku sighed and forgave the man for his interference to his nap and stood from the plush bed. Or at least he tried to. Sushi growled softly at his movement and pulled it back down with the arm he had around Izuku's middle. Izuku huffed and flicked his tail, sliding out from the cat's hold, which was protested by the elder cat's soft growl of annoyance and the large thump of his tail. Izuku shook himself off once he was out of the cat's range, and was lifted by his English teacher into the blonde's arms. The man carried him out of the room, and he meowed his goodbye to Sushi, Meow, who responded with an agitated tail flick. Izuku chuckled to himself, and his English teacher walked out from the extra room. The man was heading up to Nezu's office. Izuku buzzed excitedly. As much as he enjoyed watching his friends train, he much preferred to be actually doing something. And with Nezu, he could be learning, and the man could help him write. His English teacher hesitantly knocked on the door to the principal's office and waited until he heard the cheerful voice of the rat bear thing call for them to enter. The blonde opened the door and poked his head in, scanning the room for the white creature. Izuku, on the other hand, saw the man sitting on his desk, down lower to the ground, made so that the creature wouldn't have to climb up somewhere to sit down. He wiggled out of the man's arms and walked over to the creature, much to the dismay of his English teacher, who was confused. Izuku walked over to the principal and sat on his hind legs so he could be eye to eye with the other, and looked over at Izuku and smiled, speaking up, which made the English teacher stop and sigh in relief. Hello, Izuku. I'm glad to see you today. Izuku meowed his own greeting. Meow, meow, and bowed his head as best as he could to the creature, who dipped his head at the small cat in return. The blond man sighed and smiled, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. Welp, if that's all, I'm gonna head out. The rat smiled at the blond man, looking back at him and waving him off. Indeed. Thank you for bringing him to me. I'll bring him back down when I'm done with him, so no need to come get him. The other man nodded before scurrying off, leaving Izuku and Nezu to their own devices. The rat turned around and began to work on what was on his small desk below him once more. Izuku tapped the other with his paw. He was curious, but he didn't want to disrespect the other and peek over at what the rat was working on. The rat smiled and held up a sheet of paper for Izuku to see. I'm working on some new designs for the pointer robots. Would you like to assist me? Zuko perked up and nodded enthusiastically, tail swishing happily behind him. The rat smiled devilishly and set the paper down, pointing to another small chair similar to the one he sat on now, on the other side of the room. Then bring that over here and let's get to work. Shona was sitting in the teacher's lounge, Sushi having been put away in his carrier and ready to go home. He was waiting on his husband to return with a reward from whatever the rat was subjecting him to and tainting his mind with. The thought of the rat teaching the young boy still made him shiver with dread, though he was shaken from his thoughts by the sound of the lounge door opening and his husband's long-awaited return, though with no child in his hold. Shota stood up and walked over to the man, who looked at him in turn. Shota looked him up and down before sighing and speaking up. Where's Izuku? The man sighed and pointed up towards where Nezu's office lay. He told me not to come back for him, and that he would bring Izuku down himself. Shota let out a long-suffering sigh, rubbing his temples. School just ended. School had ended just 10 minutes ago, and he would like to leave from the hellish place. But his ward was now entangled in whatever crazy plot Nezu probably had, and God knows where. Shota knew how much Nezu liked to move around the building during the day. He sighed and sat down in his chair, leaning back in it. He's about to tell Hisashi to do the same, though he's interrupted by a small black mass falling from the heavens and onto his stomach. He jerked forward and coughed, clutching his stomach. He heard small laughter from above and sighed. He felt the small black paw on his face and heard a small, apologetic meow from below him. Meow. He looked down at his ward, who was looking up at him with big green eyes that were wide with panic and fear. He pat the small monster on the head and looked up at where he'd fallen from. Shura sat under an air vent, as he got hot easily, though this did mean Nezu untauntedly bothered him from the ceiling above him while he was sitting at his desk. The rat hopped down, landing much more gracefully than Izuku on Chota's desk, rather than his stomach. The rat smiled at Chota with a mischievous grin, and Chota fought the urge to sigh yet again. His lugs were going to give out before he was 35 from all the sighing he had done. Apologies for our tardiness. We got caught up in our work. Chota nodded and rubbing his face and picked the small fluff bastard up from his lap. It's fine. Thanks for bringing him back in one piece. The small rat nodded, smiling devilishly. Shota set the small shit on his desk beside the rat and grabbed its carrier. Zuko shot inside the plastic container quickly, and Nezu bowed to Shota. Well, I shall let you all go home. Good evening. Nezu hopped down from Shota's desk and walked over to another vent, closer to the ground. He clambered into it and disappeared into the black, leaving the couple and their ward in the teacher's lounge. Hisashi sighed and rubbed his neck, watching where the rat had disappeared and shaking his head. I don't think I'll ever get used to his antics. Shota stood, grabbing his things. Don't. He'll take advantage if you let your guard down or get comfortable. And he bites. The blond man snorted, and Shota left him in the room with that information. The other quickly scrambled to gather his things, and the other cat, while Shota waited for him by the elevator. While they waited, he looked down to Izuku, who was still standing curled up in his carrier. He lifted the plastic box up to his face and looked inside the door at the small black beast, who stared back at him with big green eyes. Shoto watched Izuku's ears pin back and he meowed once more, sounding apologetic. Meow, meow. He sighed and shook his head fondly, looking at the small thing. Kid, it's fine. You weigh like 4 pounds, if that. I get hit harder by your class. I'm not mad. It was just unexpected. Zuko perked up a little more, and his ears had moved to the point at Shota had as he spoke. Zuko meowed once more, meow, sounding like an affirmative. He let out a small breath of air, fondness for the child that had caused so much trouble filling him up. He let the carrier gently fall back to his side, and his husband came down just a few minutes later with the other little shit. Shota smiled to himself, and they began their way down the elevator, into the car, and away to their apartment, though Hisashi insisted they stop for some chicken. They've been so good, Sho. Let them have a treat. He relented to the treat, though the cats weren't allowed to leave it until they got to the apartment. Both because he didn't want them to get sick, but also it would be a good distraction while he checked their apartment for more intruders. Once they arrived at their apartment, Shota immediately got out of the car and let Hisashi entertain the rascals while he patrolled the area. He opened the door to the apartment and slid inside, as quietly as he could. He listened for a moment, but no sound came from within. He slid fully into the home and shut the door. He knew to himself how wrong it felt to navigate through these halls with his shoes still on. He checked the kitchen, every pantry, the fridge, the oven, even under the sink, though there was nothing. The living room was similar, with the balcony door seemingly untouched, and the floor spotless as they left it. He checked the guest room where Aerie slept. There was nothing there either, beside for one of her stuffies that she probably left. Then the bathroom. The shower held no seat, nor did the toilet. Then his and his husband's bedroom. It was just as they left it this morning. So he sighed and relaxed a bit. After checking the room over thoroughly, he found nothing else and walked out to alert his husband to come inside as it was safe. Only when he got outside, the man was not in the car. He was running down the street as fast as he could, chasing after a van that was currently racing far into the distance. I will say that the thumbnail is a little bit on nose, and I think anyone in their bright mind could guess what just happened there. Well, Zawa was being paranoid. Honestly, it probably would have just been smart to bring them both inside with him, you know? Bring all of them inside and then be ready to frickin' brawl it out. Okay, well, nice Discord notification. You guys get to hear who it is. It was a book. Oh my god! I am not reading that out loud. YouTube's probably still mad at me for the live. Not that they said they were mad at me, I just suspect they're secretly pissed at me. Anyway, this was chapter 23. I hope you had a good have a good day, and maybe I'll get to the next one. I don't know. The floor's dry now, which is nice. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up now. Bye.